got called away due to certain things beyond control. And he left it to me. You all are in big trouble here.
All right, yeah.
Anyway, and Sandy Bradley is supposed to be here to help me out.
Everyone's abandoning you. Eventually.
Anybody seen Sandy tootling up the trail? Anyway, Bob McQuillen. Bob McQuillen is, for me at least, he was the link between the older musicians, older than me, and then my generation of musicians, and even a few generations after me.
So if you could go in there, just go on the main.
He would play with
And
anybody,
there's a bass
any
and
age.
treble. Bass and
This
treble.
is great.
On,
He had
just turn the bass
a
down.
great style, which
It's not
he's
very
taught
clear.
to some
You
people
can
in
turn
New
them up a
Hampshire
little
who
bit,
still
too.
play the style, which is really great. And he started playing for a caller named Ralph Page, who, if you don't know who he was a caller who sort of kept confidence and going in the 20s and 30s and 40s until it eventually got a revival in the 50s in Boston. And he was responsible for that, and Bob McQuillen played for him. Anyway, I'm trying to kill time until Sandy shows.
You're very transparent.
Can you tell us any Bob jokes?
I only remember one. I have a terrible memory for jokes, and it goes this way. Don't give it away, you probably have heard it. But what side of the chicken has the most feathers?
Outside.
Yeah, no. Yes, the outside. The inside is terrible. Anyway, well, I think I'll start without Sandy with Bob's first tune. Bob didn't start composing until the 1970s or 80s, I forget when exactly. And this first tune is called Scotty O'Neill. And Scotty O'Neill was somebody whose daughter was very sweet upon up there in New Hampshire. And unfortunately, Scotty died in a motorcycle accident, and this tune came out of Bob. And we'll follow that up with a tune called Spring Song by Bob, which has no story behind it. It's just has the title in the book. Usually, Bob, I didn't bring any of Bob's books with me, but Bob published 15 volumes of books, notebooks he called it, his little bookies, and with his tunes, and there are over 1,500 tunes, and there's a 16th volume that just came out too. Every town in New Hampshire has a tune for it. And he wrote the tunes for people that he met and friends of his and fellow musicians or events and places. But Spring Song was just Spring Song. Go like this. So I get strapped in. Bob first came to Lady of the Lake Pennsylvania in 1984, I think for a fall weekend, and he came with Pete Colby and April Limber. April Limber was a fiddler, and Pete Colby was a banjo player. And they had a trio which they called Old New England, which played for many years until Pete and April passed away. And then I first played with Bob here in the 80s, sometime in there. And I would frequently play here with Bob with Kathy Whitesides on the fiddle, as some of you will remember. He had a lot to do with his camp. He paid to put new keycaps on the piano in Forester because the old one had chipped keys and you could cut your fingers on it. I did it. But anyway, a lot on the keys. That's Mark Simons too. Let's play Sarah's Mary. We're going to play two jigs by Bob. The first is Sarah's jig, written for Sarah Bowen. I don't know how you really pronounce her last name. I should know it because I know her really well. Who is a whistle and flute player from New Hampshire and a publisher and was a great friend of Bob's. And the second is Mary Elder's jig. And Mary Elder I met in Seattle many years ago on a houseboat. Just by serendipity. Anyway, here are their jigs. character who used to be around here a lot was Warren Argo, whom I'm sure some of you remember. And Warren did sound here for many years when we were back in Forester, having all the dances there before this place was built. And he was a large personality, shall we say. Yeah, he was a great guy. And this was a tune that Bob wrote for him called Argo's Real. He also wrote a waltz for Warren too, but we haven't learned it. Without playing at least one waltz, and if you feel like getting up and waltzing, there's lots of room in back. So we'll play Larry's Waltz. This was written for, oops, sorry. We'll play Larry's Waltz. Is this on? There it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
We'll play Larry's Waltz. This was recorded along with the two jigs we played. The jigs were recorded, and this waltz were recorded on the first New England Chestnuts album, which Sandy played on, with Rodney and Randy Miller and George Wilson and Steve Woodard. Speaking of albums, I happen to have a few recordings out in the lobby there, as well as some of the other fine performers you'll find this weekend have recordings out there. So you might want to peruse them. Bob McQuillen's on two of the albums I brought. So if you want to hear his piano playing, great way to do it. You ready? Oh, sorry. Two notes. have any other comments they want to make about Bob, or any questions or anything like that? Somebody else going to speak? Susan?
When I first moved to Spokane in '80, I had played violin, classical, high school band or orchestra, but I couldn't hear music, and so I chose to dance instead. But Bob's music books were the ones that, at that time, were the only kind of thing that was out there with contradance music in it, besides the Fiddler's Fate book. So that was how I got started with Bob, and I don't have them all, but I have a good collection of them. Do I play? No, but it's a good story.
Yeah, I guess I just want to tell the story of how I first met Bob. It was in 1977, and I traveled up to, and I just started playing accordion that year, and I was traveling up to Brattleboro for this great pilgrimage to go to an all-night dance in Brattleboro, Vermont at the Chelsea House Cafe. And I brought my accordion with me, of course. And we played, and I'd sit in, and there were lots of people. The band was Applejack, which was a band back then. And there were lots of musicians straggling out the wings of the stage onto the dance floor, sitting in. It was a scene. It was a great scene. Anyway, I remember we played a tune called The Star Monster, which is an Irish reel. And Bob shouted at me after we did that and said, "Was that you playing that accordion?" Which I said yes. And he said, "Well, that was effing great." Yeah. So now, is your band, you all are here. You want to take over? You go first.
Switch over?
Yeah.
No need for a microphone, I'll just speak with some volume. So I'm going to start off just on the lonesome here. I never had the privilege of meeting Bob McQuillen, which is a great pity and something that I am quite sad about, because every story I hear makes him sound like somebody who I very much wish I'd been able to know personally. But he managed to touch my life pretty strongly nonetheless, and those who have been to the previous two camps this year, I've told this story both times, and I'll probably continue to do so because it's kind of an important one to me. This is Bob touched my life pretty significantly through one piece of music, which when I was in high school and with more enthusiasm than sense and choosing the three loudest instruments in traditional Irish music, I spent a few summers at the Augusta Heritage Center in Elkins, West Virginia. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. I figured there'd be at least one folky crowd like this. But I spent two or three summers there studying Irish button accordion, first with Billy McComiskey and then with Mark McQuillen. But I'll always remember that first summer, which was just, I had never known that music could be that good. And I sat in with the Kelsey band, and I was told that it was tradition that that the Kelsey always ended with a very specific tune, which was a waltz that Bob had written years and years ago. I can't be cool and tell you an exact year, but years ago for the Augusta Center, when he had been there on one of his many rambles, and he wrote this tune called the Augusta Waltz, and I heard it and immediately fell in love, and it became my favorite waltz and has since remained my favorite waltz, to the point that when I fell in love in a different way, I eventually walked down the aisle to it. So I also strong-armed my bandmate into putting it on a record that we just released, and even letting me play the accordion on it, because even though I never knew Bob, I could imagine that he would have something to say if I had the option to play accordion on his tune and forsook it. So I hope you enjoyed the Augusta Waltz. And I will echo Laurie and say that if you feel like dancing, you should feel free to do so. We're going to get the rest of the band back up here.
I did get to meet Bob a handful of times. No one's mentioned, I don't think anyway, no one's mentioned yet. When I knew him, he was rocking the neck beard. He had the biggest, bushiest, he would keep his face shaved and he just let this, like his huge neck beard. And I think he loved it, 'cause man, it made you look twice. Should I use it? Probably.
Sort of. So Bob wrote a number of hits, and this is probably one of his biggest hits. At least in the fairly insular world, in the small pond of contra dance music, Bob McQuillen was a 9-pound catfish. But we, as people who enjoy like getting a little bit extra, I think you should get your feet for this.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I think
You just keep talking for a while then.
I'll do that. I'll do that. So I think an interesting thing about this tune is that a lot of people have told me that it is the original rock and roll contra tune. And I would say that that's probably pretty accurate. I mean, I think that there have been a number of bands since the resurgence and revival of contra dance music that have played fast and loose with tradition and incorporated other influences and sort of helped make this into the like vibrant, living tradition it is. And that's a very wonderful thing. But I think going back to when it was having that first revival, and a lot of people, I mean, I'm saying this as if I was there, but just like, it's easy to forget that like there's been people like composing and pushing the boundaries since even when that first revival happened. And this tune, as like the original, as you know, people call it the original rock and roll contra tune, and as people who have been responsible for some degree of ridiculosity in contra dance music, I feel like we couldn't resist having a go at putting our own sort of twisted stamp on it. So,
And I think this is all we have. But is there anything after this?
No.
Like dance time?
let's just hit it.
I have to say, I think it was maybe 2008, 2007, when I saw Bob McQuillen at Bear Hug, and we were talking about Dancing Bear, that song they just played, and he said, it's just a simple tune. Everybody insists on jazzing it up. Why can't we just play it the way I wrote
Ken was telling me about how Rodney Miller and Russ Berenberg and some other people did a like kind of rockified electric version of it on an album called Airplane, and apparently Bob was not impressed with that version. He referred to it as dancing bear shit.
Dancing Bear shirts.
And well, anyway, I think we heard that story and all looked at each other and went, I bet we could play it even smoother.
No, he just didn't realize the awesome potential of his neo-rock tune that he created. So next up on the schedule is